Welcome back again in this video, or let's say podcast. Let me just change the position of the microphone here so you can hear me better. I think you can hear me better. Can you hear me better? Can you confirm? Can you leave a comment that you can hear me better? No, I'm just joking. This is just a test of the quality of the microphone because we are recording a relatively long podcast. In this podcast, we continue the story. But again, this is a reminder that it's not about the story that I am narrating. It's about the listening that gets into your ears through this video. It's very important to keep that in mind because what we are doing, we're just drawing some analytical assessment or processing of the text that we see here to get it. So this story in particular, I just need to get it off my back because we've been stuck with this story for a long time. We are stuck in a rut. We're stuck in the rutness of this story. I'm not sure if this is a word, but you can Google it. Of the story here. Story is not that long. But since we are analyzing every part of it in this podcast, we just need to get to the bottom line of why the story is taking that much long. And I have already answered that question in the previous video and the one before that. And that is just to give it a shot when it comes to looking at the text, analyzing the text, and then understanding some of the verbs, some of the adjectives, some of the nouns, some of the adverbs that we do come across in our daily life. And that we might encounter in this story in particular here. So when she had spent all her money, Joanna returned to the street where she had spent the night. We have talked about this structure before, and sometimes if you look at this structure here, of every one of the sentences that we have in English, they usually come associated with time. And one of the problematic time and tenses that we do have in English, we come across EFL learners. EFL learners are English as a foreign language learners. Now, we call them EFL as an abbreviation here because this refers back to English as a foreign language. Sometimes they come across this issue of misunderstanding or getting past confused with present perfect or past perfect. Now, look at this structure here. If you look, she has spent all the night. Now, if we look at she had spent all the night, the EFL learners, English as a foreign language learners, might say, now why can't we just say she spent the night? Like, what's the difference here? I mean, explain it to me. Can you? If you can pull your camera or your phone, put it in front of you, and you nail it on the head. When we say he nailed it on the head, he got exactly the point that we want or the point that is intended. You nail it on the head when it comes to the explanation of the meaning of this specific tense. It's very important to understand that this is different from past. So if we say she has spent the night, she has spent the night before she returned to the street. So the process of returning to the street where she had spent the night, we can't say simply she spent the night. We can simply say Joanna returned to the street where she had spent the night. Now, her process of returning took place after she spent the night. So the act of spending the night took place before she returned. She probably spent many days or nights on these streets, wandering or doing whatever. So this tense/aspect of English might always be misinterpreted by EFL learners who study English in a way that they just touch the surface of English, the shells of English. Like, so when they talk, you feel that they're just walking on ice, on thin ice. It's that simple. You need to have some depth, and the depth comes from listening. The depth comes from your analysis of the language, and probably making sure that the quality of your speech is up to the level. It's on the bar of expectations. Some people just get, so carried on doing these kind of speeches about the importance of, focusing on speaking, but just marginalizing grammar. So I tell them, please hold your horses. To hold your horses means, in English, we say that, hold your horses. Just slow down, carefully analyze the kind of situation, and don't jump the gun. It's not a piece of cake when it comes to looking at the structure or the anatomy of grammar. But it's very important to keep in mind something quite essential. The grammar is the basic component of English. It's the basic means of making communication, or making communication communicable. Without grammar, things will just sound so random, haphazard, disorganized, and everywhere. They're like not organized or symmetrical or in harmony, as we say in English, of course. So the idea, if you look at the text that we're just analyzing here, and you see this event has taken place before that event. So the event that takes place is number one. We say had plus the verb. So you say, I had slept in my house before I left. I had eaten before I went to work. I have driven before I see my dad. I have traveled before I settle in Belgium. Understanding this and processing it correctly will keep things in order, will keep things in their place. And it will be just focusing on that through this podcast. Probably you're going to hit two birds with one stone. I'm not going to say to kill two birds with one stone, because I'm an advocate of, wildlife, safety and protection. So to hit two birds with one stone. All day she sat there. Now look at the transition here. One of the key features of English is the consistency. The consistency of the narrativeness, the consistency of the structures that the writer/speakers use when they talk. There are actually two features that I really like, and mostly I focus on when it comes to speaking, to delivering speech in English. Number one, they keep their sentences short, which is very dissimilar to Arabic, where they just keep adding structures plus sentences to make a big chunk of speech with no pause at all. And this is really annoying to the listeners, because you just need some span to process what the people are talking about. Otherwise, things will not sound clear to you. So you just need to understand what they're talking about. You need to understand why they are saying what and where and for what reason. And how you do so will eventually contribute to your response back to them based on what they said. Opposite means في الجانب المقابل, في الجانب المعاكس. So if we look at the word, it's opposite. Opposite. The word that we do have here is, look at the opposite. 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 This sound might be one of the most poor and misused sounds in Middle East, because people just shift this sound. I don't recall that we do have this kind of structure in Arabic, this kind of phoneme. Phoneme is the smallest sound that the human being can produce that can be a component to contribute to making one big chunk of word to make sense of what you say. The word is opposite. No, a lot of speakers say opposite. Opposite. I mean, I understand what you say, but you're not saying it correctly. You see the point? So that's the magic, the beauty of learning words from this podcast, is that you get to see the transcription هو الرسم الصوتي to what I'm trying to say, and then building on it with your assessment, your analysis, your listening to the words that we do have here. The one before that is empty. Empty, and you look here, P might be sometimes used, and should you like not to use it, don't use it. So you say empty. The glass is empty. And nobody's going to judge your fluency or your accuracy of pronunciation there, because you're trying to make your life easier by reducing the plosive sounds that just annoy a lot of people. Pebe, tede, kege. These kind of plosives, some of them, might be annoying to the ears of the listeners. So you got to be careful when you say them. You have to make sure that you say them exactly how the native speakers say them, because that's the ultimate goal, is to become a professional speaker of English. And to be a professional speaker of English, you need just to practice a lot. To practice a lot. And you notice here that I'm trying to just not say the T with the heavy load of the T sound, which is a kind of plosive sound. So it's empty. Look at how do we say this? Opposite. Look at the opposite side. Opposite. People walked past her. Now the word past is, I assure you, it's past. It has two variations. In British English, they say past. In American English, they say past. Again, past. 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 I'm not trying to get closer to the mic because I don't want to generate this kind of plosiveness there. But it's past, which is something that I like it more. When I hear people say it, I'm over the moon of happiness, because I hear the quality of the real organic sound that is generated, that is made, that is manufactured, that is orchestrated by native speakers. So if you speak, if you enunciate, if you say it exactly like native speakers, wow, that's contributing so much to improving your English proficiency to a huge level. And I'm not exaggerating here when I'm saying this word, because learning pronunciation is just like subscribing to music course. It's a musical course. It's a music course. Why? Because we deal with sounds, we deal with pronunciation, we deal with sound waves. And when when you deal with sound waves, you know, you got to know how the sound is generated in the mouth, because the mouth is a cutting machine. It cuts the waves of air to produce the chunks that we ultimately call phonemes that will eventually become words and sentences that make sense to some extent. And that is where you have to shoot for the moon. You have to make sure that you're 99.9 professional speaker of English. And to achieve that level of proficiency, you need to practice more. You need to listen to me, but not to me. Not only do you have to listen to this podcast, but diversify your listening. Don't sit on the fence of just saying, I'm just going to focus on British English or American English. This is something beyond our discussion for now. You need to condition your ears to listening to a variety of dialects and a variety of accents to get yourself familiar with these to be familiar, to condition your ears to this kind of structure, to this kind of pronunciation. It's very important. You should keep that in mind. And even if it gets you to a point of throwing in the towel, even to the point of maybe you get to throw in the towel and sacrifice being ashamed or being embarrassed because you say this word this way or this word that way. Don't be afraid of making these kind of small, tiny mistakes, because even native speakers are making mistakes when they speak English. Believe me, native speakers make mistakes when they speak English. So don't turn a blind eye to the fact that pronunciation is essential. Actually, a lot of people wouldn't make sense of what you say if you say it incorrectly. Some felt sorry. Now, when we say some means some people. And for rhetorical purposes, the word people has been deleted here. Felt, which is the past of feel, felt. It's felt. And this word is sorry or sorry or sorry. I'm sorry. So there are three variations of it. There's sorry, and there's sorry. It depends on where you're coming from. UK, US, Ireland, Australia, or other countries. For her. Others, referring back to people, now here what we are talking about, wondered what she was doing. Look, I'm just dropping the G here, and I'm not saying was, but I'm saying was, or was. Usually in American English, they just de-stress it. They de-stress it because it's a function word. It's not a content word. Because it's not a content word like, for example, she or people that carry meaning in a sense. It gets de-stressed in English, when it comes to that. Don't be up in... But most... let's keep reading. But most people... I'm not saying but. Some people say but. Some people say but. But most people didn't pay her any attention. Pay her any attention. Look, the pronunciation is any. Pay her any attention, not Annie or Annie. It's any attention. And the word is attention, which means intibah or ihtimam. Attention. Attention, please. Attention. Don't feel you're walking on thin ice just because you're practicing speaking. You're practicing listening to me. You're practicing in front of your close friends so that it saves you a lot of embarrassment once you go to the real life scenario or situation where you face people and showcase your ability, your proficiency in English. So it's better to practice and be ashamed with your close friends, to say this word again, to practice them correctly with me when we are reading this kind of, short story. But at the same time, that is going to save you a lot of effort, a lot of embarrassment, a lot of disappointment, a lot of failure, should that be considered as failure, which I am not an advocate of. We don't call it failure as much as we call it stages of learning. And going back here to the beginning, to square number one, where we say returned. No, we're practicing the pronunciation here. So it's returned. When she has spent all her money, Joanna returned to the street, to the street, where she has spent the night, where she has spent the night. I read once in a book that no matter how long the auxiliary verb is in the structure of one sentence, you have to make sure that you say it as one word. So instead of saying she spent the night, you have to say she has spent the night in the same length of you say she spent the night. All day she sat there. All day she sat there. And the verb is sat. In British, maybe they say sought, but I prefer sat. Does that mean I'm right and they're wrong? No. I'm an EFL learner. I'm a teacher of English as a second language. I speak English as my second non-native language. I'm not a native speaker. I will never be a native speaker. But when it comes to grammar, we might be better than native speakers because native speakers have listened, have heard, have gotten their ears conditioned to listening before they learn to speak or learn to write or learn to read. Whereas in our case, we learned to read first, and then we learned to write, and then sometimes in some very rare conditions, we learned to speak. I mean, the generation here is a bit different because people now have more access to multimedia and channels and YouTube, and they can access hundreds of channels where they can listen, they can condition their children's listening to an atmosphere where English gets practiced orally. So they don't have a problem with English per se, but with socially activating it to be prevalent in their daily use or daily usage. The point that I am trying to denote here is quintessentially the fact that when you practice, you need to advocate for spreading the word as a non-native speaker, that no matter how many mistakes that you make, they're just contributing. They are getting you to a level of practicing and learning. In addition to that, there was a very important point that I wanted to mention here. As EFL learners of English, we have learned speaking on later stages before and listening on later stages, but we have learned reading first. So we're stronger relatively with grammar, but weak with pronunciation and, speaking in general. Going back here to the text, all day she sat there looking at the empty wall opposite. Now the word is opposite. opposite, opposite, opposite. Repeat after me, opposite. People walked past her. People walked past her. Some people blame me for the fact that I exaggerate the pronunciation. Well, hell yeah. Duh. I'm just teaching you pronunciation, so I need to exaggerate every single tone in this damn course. It's a podcast for listening. So if I'm not exaggerating, who is supposed to exaggerate? Think about it. I'm trying to teach you pronunciation. This damn course is for improving your pronunciation. So I'm exaggerating every word. I'm acting sometimes to get the point across. Maybe your guess is as good as mine when it comes to this part, that I do know that I'm exaggerating. This is not the typical standard pronunciation of English, because I'm not doing a voiceover for a book. I'm teaching you. I'm sharing with you my experience as a teacher of how you can improve your pronunciation to get it better. How can you get your pronunciation better without exaggerating and repeating every single word hundreds of times? I mean, if we truncate the amount of time that children got to a level of proficiency in English, maybe that's probably 10 years. Now, if you're taking a course in English and you say, well, this course had saved me by the bell. Now, if I get it right, if I say that right, this course has helped me to improve my English, and my English now is on very professional C level. Prove it. Can you speak, nonstop for like 5 minutes about the role of technology in our life? If you can do so, if you can speak with this level of academic vocabulary and good pronunciation, then good for you. Otherwise, you just need to, how I exaggerate every piece of word here to give you the right tone, to practice it again and again and again, so that we satisfactorily achieve the level of improvement that I shoot for, that I feel happy and excited to see you speak it, to be at this level of a proficiency. What we have covered here, probably we have covered many expressions in English. And again, as I said, there's a scientist from Morocco, and he's specialized in religions. He said, I was blamed. Now, I'm quoting what he said, but I'm not quoting literally what he said. I'm just getting you the point. He said, people blame me that I spent so much time analyzing this book, which is a very short book. It's not about the book. It's about the experience that the book emanates to people. It's about the kind of things that this book can be used as a beacon for learning, as a sample, as a draft or a benchmark on which we can analyze each one of the sentences or each one of the quotes and derail, of course, knowingly that we're derailing from the main topic. We're not achieving the wanted objective in one single session, but that kind of derailment of the track of achieving the objectives of the lesson is for the benefit of the audience, is to help them get exposed to language better, is to help them understand English better, understand how the geography of English language is in a way that we can look at a map of English and see where the weaknesses are, our weaknesses when it comes to English pronunciation. And I'm trying to help you with that. Probably I achieve it to some extent. Maybe I satisfy some people, but we cannot surely satisfy everyone. But sometimes, I'm being honest to myself, people criticize the fact that I'm presenting a very elongated session. Listen, this course, this podcast, you name it, is to help you get as much exposure to English as possible, to analyze every single word of this short story and to put in the perspective of listening and pronunciation. Analyze the words, get them structurally where I want them to be, and then present them to you in a way that can be, categorized as pronunciation course or podcast. So it benefits you on the go when you're going to work, when you're having a free break from work, or going back home, commuting with your friends, traveling on a plane. Just put on your headphones, try to listen to as much as possible, and then will ensue. And then the benefits will come after. Thank you very much. مدرب اللغة وليد خالد.